Hello and welcome back to the Scenario 7 podcast. My name is Sam and today I'm joined by my lovely co-host, it's Matt Collier. Matt, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, thank you, Sam. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and today we are here for a review of the Spanish Grand Prix. The Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya often disappoints, but I think that today it possibly redeemed itself. Let's start with qualifying, though. Matt, what were the things that stood out to you from qualifying?
There wasn't many massive shocks. I think one of the main ones that stick out is Lando Norris being very unlucky with his track limits. Unfortunately, that meant he was out and finished 11th in quali. The Ferraris looked really strong qualifying. I think Ricciardo P9 in qualifying was also a bit of a surprise. There wasn't really many shocks. Also, Alonso, I think Fernando Alonso in the Alpine was probably a big shock for him and the team, which is probably the reason why he took his penalty. But all in all, there wasn't any huge shocks, just a few little ones.
Yeah, no massive shocks. As you said, Alonso out in Q1, probably the biggest. Ricciardo out qualifying Lando for the first time this season, but it was with track time deleted, which Lando definitely thinks is harsh. Both Haas in the top 10 during a weekend where so many teams bought upgrades and they bought none, but both cars getting in the top 10 was a good result for them. And Magnussen came out and said they had a problem with the car, so it could have been even better for them. Mercedes upgrades as well looked to have potentially worked with fourth and sixth in qualifying, which is solid for both Russell and Hamilton. And then, of course, Charles Leclerc putting his car on pole. Matt, moving to Sunday, what were your general thoughts on the race? It was definitely a better race than we've had in recent years.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised in a way. Another thing from quali, of course, was Verstappen's DRS or his power cutting out or something along those lines. But onto the race. When I first saw that it was Spain, I was like, oh, it's probably going to be a dull race, as we've always explained. It's been hard to overtake, but these cars are so much better for racing. It's so much easier to follow cars, and the strategy for this race was also very entertaining. And a lot of things that happened in the race were unexpected, as we'll go into when we do the team by team breakdown. But it was a very entertaining race for the Spanish Grand Prix.
Yeah, it certainly was. In our preview, said that this is going to be the Grand Prix, which is the biggest test so far for these new cars. Can they make this track, which often doesn't provide the best racing, can it add a bit more entertainment? And last week, I complained that the issue we have at the moment is that we can't have exciting races without safety cars. And I was wrong, it appears, because there was no safety car in this race, and it was very good. As you said, the cars be able to follow provide some great entertainment, especially the battle with George Russell and Verstappen. Of course, that battle continued a lot longer because of the fact that Verstappen had a big DRS problem. He couldn't get it open in some DRS zones, but others he could. So he did have a big problem with that. But there was some great racing, and it was just really good to watch a Spanish Grand Prix and be on the edge of my seats for parts of it. We haven't had that in quite a while. One thing I would say, though, get rid of the drone. Sky, we don't need it. The drone shot's not very nice. It's horrible. It's lower quality, and it's a risk to the cars if it suddenly breaks down and lands on the track. So that's my one thing. It's literally not even about the race. Just get rid of the drone. Just pointless, and it almost makes you a bit sick watching it like wind around. Oh, not ideal. But let's look at the incident report. Not too much going on, But lap 1 was the first incident between Lewis Hamilton and Kevin Magnussen, who tangled going round turn 4 after Hamilton tried to take a place off Sainz, and then Magnussen attacked round the outside. The stewards deemed this a racing incident, which saw Magnussen in the gravel and Hamilton get a puncture. What did you think, Matt?
I think that's a fair assessment. Both of them had to go into the pits. It wasn't like one driver turned into another or one driver squeezed each other. So, yeah, I think that was a fair assessment from the FIA.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think first lap incidents are treated on with more, they're given more leeway. So anyway, and this incident, Magnussen had the right to go round the outside, but I don't think Hamilton really did anything wrong either. So I agree with you. I agree with the FIA. Good decision. Racing incident. On lap 27, Charles Leclerc retired with a power unit problem. On lap 28 is the second incident with Pierre Gasly and Lance Stroll, who at the exit of turn 1 had a bit of a tangle as well, with Gasly looking like he hit Stroll more, and the stewards agreed with that, giving Gasly a 5-second penalty. Matt, again, did the stewards get this right?
Yeah, I think so. I think Gasly just forgot he was on this left-hand side and basically just squeezed Stroll and kind of forgot he was there. So, yeah, I think that penalty was deserved.
Yeah, I agree again. I think the stewards had they definitely had a good Sunday. They had a good weekend. That was the correct decision. Gasly did hit Stroll, and it did ruin Stroll's race, who was making a charge for potentially points, but we'll never know because Gasly did hit him. And Gasly, a driver that's gone under the radar a bit, how disappointing a season he's had so far, but we maybe touch on that later. And then lap 31, Zhou Guanyu retired with a power unit problem, carry on his torrid luck, I think it is this season. His car just can't just can't last the full race at the moment, which is so disappointing. And that's all of the incidents to report. So let's now go on to the team by team breakdown. Looking first at Red Bull, who take the lead in the constructors, in the only change in the constructors this weekend. Verstappen started second and finished first. Perez started fifth, finished second with the fastest lap. How would you look at Red Bull this weekend? We did have Verstappen going off at turn 4, but still recovered to win. And Perez fastest lap in second, despite him not being very happy, is still a very good result. How do you feel like the Red Bulls did?
If I was to grade it, it'd probably be an A-star, especially with how quick and competitive Ferrari looked in practice. I think Leclerc was fastest in all 3 practice sessions, or one of Ferraris. And yeah, as you said, to come away with first and second, you would explained how Perez, I think, qualified 5th. So to come back with second and the fastest lap, and to be fair, he led a few laps of the race as well. And this is massive for Red Bull in both drivers and constructors. So yeah, if I was to grade it, it'd definitely be an A-star.
Yeah, they definitely had a very good day on Sunday, getting the maximum amount of points. You can't really ask for much more of this. Sergio Perez wasn't very happy with team orders saying, well, first of all, he let Max pass earlier in the race, and then he wasn't allowed to defend against Max when he had the lead. What do you think about this? Do you think it's understandable? Because you would be frustrated, but at the same time, Max did have much fresher tyres when Perez was in first and Verstappen was fighting to try and overtake him.
From my perspective, I always prefer to let them race. Yeah, I'm not a fan of so-and-so's faster than you, or let this driver go past. I'm just thinking of how many Hamilton-Rosberg incidences and brilliant battles they had, and yeah, it's always disappointing when the engineer comes on the radio and says, let the driver behind go past. And yeah, because I felt like Perez probably deserved the race win from what we did this weekend. And yeah, I'm not really a fan of this kind of stuff. But, I guess the teams have to prioritize, the drivers in the championship. So I can understand why they did it.
Yeah, well, you mentioned how many great battles there were between Hamilton and Rosberg, but then iconically in Spain, they did have a collision when they were allowed to race, and they had a lot of other collisions throughout the season, which had a detrimental effect on the team. So I can understand the perspective letting Verstappen pass, but Perez has just been immense for the team. He said we're going to have words after. It'll be interesting if anything comes from it. I just think it's just going to be Red Bull calming him down. I think it's very likely they'll give him a new contract. They're in contract talks already, and Verstappen thinks the world of him. That's very clear. Perez has done so much for Verstappen, and Perez has taken his driving to another level at Red Bull, and I think it's great to see. But I don't blame him for being frustrated. Looking at Ferrari, they didn't get the points they would have wanted this weekend. I think that's a very fair assessment. Charles Leclerc, first place to a DNF after a power unit problem, as I mentioned earlier, and Sainz starting third, going off into the gravel at turn 4, making the same mistake Verstappen did a few laps later, and finishing 4th from 3rd. How will Ferrari look at this weekend? Because it is definitely going to be frustrating that their number one driver in Leclerc DNF'd. And from a reliability standpoint, it kind of came from nowhere. So that's going to be quite a worry, won't it?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about really with Ferrari reliability. And yeah, I'm just thinking about Imola, their home Grand Prix, and them struggling there. Spanish Grand Prix for Sainz, cracks under the pressure. But to be fair, at least this time he didn't fully DNF and give up and get no points. So at least he was able to recover to 4th. And yeah, this Ferrari power unit kind of just, I don't know, maybe just didn't like the heat of Spain, because even Wanu Zhou DNF'd. Yeah, but it was very weird watching it. All of a sudden, Leclerc said, "I got no power." We're just like, "Oh, the leader's got no power. What's going on?" That came out of nowhere. And yeah, Sainz with that mistake at turn 4. I've discussed already the difference between Red Bull and Ferrari, and I've always said that Red Bull are just the more experienced and well-drilled team. And yeah, I do think over the season, Ferrari will have more slip-ups than Red Bull. Yeah, which is changed to constructors, as you said. But for Sainz to finish 4th, it wasn't too bad of a weekend, considering what happened on turn 4 for him.
Yeah, I completely agree with that assessment. It is going to be mistakes that will cost Ferrari. Leclerc has been mistake prone, even in qualifying on one of his hot laps. I know he did qualifying first, but on his first hot lap in Q3, he did spin the car. And Sainz this season, despite a promising start, has slipped up a few times and not getting a podium today. And Ferrari only getting 12 points compared to Red Bull's 44 is quite... it's a big loss in the constructors' battle. So worrying signs for Ferrari, with Verstappen winning every race he's finished in. So, which is quite crazy, winning every race that he's finished in. So Ferrari needs to get their acts together, and hopefully that reliability issue with Leclerc isn't an issue that carries on much longer, especially not in Monaco. He has to finish in Monaco. He needs to break that voodoo. But moving on to a team that definitely had a very good weekend, considering where they've been at points this season, are Mercedes. First of all, George Russell starting in P4 and finishing 3rd, second podium of the year, I'm going to repeat every race he continues this on for. Only driver to finish in the top 5 in every race this season. And the more races he does it, it's more of a staggering achievement considering where the Mercedes was. But fantastic result for Russell. And then Hamilton, who finished 6th and finished 5th, which doesn't sound like he's had the best drive, but that doesn't tell the whole story, with him tangling on lap 1, being P19 after pitting, saying we should just retire the car, just almost giving up hope, and then fighting his way through the field. Could have been a P4 finish. That's the, I think, worry with Mercedes. That is the big worry going into the future, that they bought upgrades this weekend and they clearly worked. They're a lot quicker. Their porpoising is much better on the straights and better on the corners as well, but still a few issues on the corners, but much better. But towards the end, both cars had a massive risk of DNF. But overall, Matt, what do you think of the weekend?
I think they'll be very pleased. Just to reiterate, Russell finished 3rd, Hamilton 5th. Coming into this weekend, they definitely looked more competitive in practice. And the fact that Russell was leading a fair chunk of the race, he did some brilliant defending against Verstappen. It's kind of just showing how good Russell is and how much he deserves that seat. He was probably unlucky, but he didn't end up with maybe a 2nd or a 1st, but those Red Bulls were just way too quick. And with Red Bull splitting the strategy, it meant that Russell couldn't really do much about it. And for Hamilton, great recovery drive from what happened on the first lap. And he was able to saw his way for the field to get 5th. I think Mercedes will be very pleased with how they did this weekend.
Yeah, they certainly will be. Toto Wolff said after the race that Lewis Hamilton would have had a shot at the lead if he didn't crash. Matt, what do you think? Do you think they had the pace to compete for the lead? I mean, Red Bull looked very quick on Sunday, especially.
I don't know. It's an interesting one. I still feel like Red Bull, and I'm sure Verstappen would have got his elbows out if Hamilton was trying to overtake him for the lead. I don't know. It could have been interesting, but we'll never know.
Yeah, it's all hypothetical at the end of the day, but great points for Mercedes. 25 points when you're considering Ferrari, as I said earlier, got 12. Some very good points for them and a lot of promise going into the next race. Now on to McLaren, and it seems to be a similar story every race at the moment. So you've got Lando Norris starting 11th, finishing 8th, getting some great points. Then Ricciardo starting 9th, finally beating Norris in qualifying, out-qualifying him for the first time this season, finishing 12th. And considering Norris has been diagnosed with tonsillitis and was racing with it throughout the whole race, and after the race got rushed to the, he didn't do any interviews. He went to the medics in the McLaren HQ, not in a great way. I think what an achievement for him. But look at the team as a whole. How do you think McLaren did this weekend, getting 4 points?
I think where they are in the midfield, I think it'd be an okay result that they got points. As you said, Norris having all his illness troubles, still to finish 8th, getting 4 points, especially in the heat of Spain. I think he should be proud of that race. Ricciardo, he just doesn't quite have the race pace. As you said, he qualified P9, and he got. I just don't understand how Ricciardo drops off so much in the races. But I think the way the midfield battle's going, I think McLaren will be happy they've got points. Not a terrible weekend for McLaren.
Not terrible at all. And we wish Norris the best in his recovery from tonsillitis. But Ricardo just needs to. I agree with you. I don't know what happens during the race. He just can't overtake. He really struggles with overtaking and having that race pace. I don't really know what happens with him because we have seen so many times Ricardo being fantastic at Red Bull, at Renault even did really well at points. And at McLaren, it just hasn't really worked out, bar a few races last year, especially Monza, where he did get fantastic race win. It's just very worrying. And it wouldn't surprise me if he got ousted for next season, but we'll have to wait and see. Still early days, of course. Now, Alfa Romeo is up next, and Valtteri Bottas starting seventh, finishing sixth. Zhou Guanyu 15th to DNF, getting 8 points as a team. How do you look at their weekend? I mean, Bottas, I don't think he's talked about anymore because people are just used to him being the best of the rest. He seems to get that award pretty much every race now. But finishing sixth again, fantastic result for him.
Yeah, it was a fantastic result. It felt like maybe he could have got a bit higher if the strategy was played slightly different. I think he was P3 at one point. But Bottas is just getting all those points for Alfa Romeo. Guan Yu Zhou's just having all of the bad luck. He has finished P11 and he's also finished P10, but he doesn't quite have the knowledge of how to drive the car and the experience that Bottas has, being in F1 for a few more years than him. And yeah, eight points, as you said. I think they'll be very, very pleased. And yeah, Bottas must be very happy he didn't accept the Williams contract and decide to go for Alfa Romeo. So yeah, they'll definitely be pleased this weekend. Maybe not the reliability though.
Yeah, that is certainly a worry with the two people that DNF both having the Ferrari engine, which so far before this race has definitely been the superior engine. Zhou Guanyu, I just feel so sorry for him because he has got some good race results. As you said, finished 11th, got some points his first race in Bahrain, finishing 10th. And his car just keeps breaking down. And it's not his fault in the last two races anyway. He's got DNFs and he just, it's frustrating for him, especially as a young driver who's trying to prove himself. His car breaking down a lot isn't ideal, but hopefully he's looked at they're a lot more lenient with him because at the end of the day, it's not his fault. These are just technical problems. And hopefully as the season goes on, the luck will balance out and he can show what he can really do. Let's now go to Alpine and some great points for them as well, getting the same amount of points with Alfa Romeo with 8, despite having two drivers that finished the race. Esteban Ocon qualifying 12th, finishing 7th, and Fernando Alonso from the back of the grid after changing engine, finishing 9th, which is a fantastic result. Matt, with Alpine, does it look like a car that has great race pace and all right quali pace?
Yeah, they definitely got potential. Quali pace, I remember Alonso, Australia, going purple in sector 2 and then ended up, I think something failed and ended up crashing into the wall. Yeah, their race pace definitely looks strong. I remember Saudi Arabia, both the Alpines were ahead of Bottas and they were fighting each other. But yeah, they'll be very pleased with the points they got, considering Alonso started last. And yeah, Ocon had a brilliant drive, finishing P7. And yeah, that's quite a fair few points that Alpine have picked up this weekend. And yeah, I think they'll be pleased with how they've done.
Yeah, it seems an interesting midfield battle emerging with almost McLaren, Alfa Romeo, and Alpine all look pretty competitive. And Ocon, again, another driver that's gone under the radar, P7, a very good result for him. Going on to a team that, compared to last season anyway, just haven't really got going as AlphaTauri. They did pick up a singular point this weekend, and that point came from Yuki Tsunoda, who started 13th, finishing 10th, and then Pierre Gasly starting at 14th, finishing 13th after a 5-second penalty with a collision with Stroll. How do you look at AlphaTauri this weekend? And Yuki Tsunoda has, I think, over double the points of Gasly this year. I feel like Gasly's gone under the radar a bit with how poor a start to the season he's had. What do you think about that, and how do you look at how they've done this weekend?
Yeah, I think Tsunoda's definitely improved to the results he got last season. I think that he's finally switched on, and I remember, I think, where was he based? I think he was based in London or somewhere, and he moved to Italy to be close to the factory, and he's definitely put a lot more hard work in with fitness and all that kind of stuff. And to be fair, it's showing on the track, as you said, outperforming Gasly. And yeah, this isn't the Gasly of last year. Gasly was very consistent last year, getting quite a few P5, P6s around that area. But yeah, this AlphaTauri car, it's just so difficult to understand its potential. It's very hit and miss. They've also had some reliability problems as well. Tsunoda at Saudi Arabia. I feel like they'll be disappointed that they haven't built a competitive car compared to last season, that other teams that were struggling last year have built a better car than them. Because at the end of the season, when they get their extra millions, it's definitely going to cost them.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you. It's hard to understand what the potential of this AlphaTauri is, because it's very sporadic. You don't know what races it's going to be good at. It seems slightly track dependent. It's got a few reliability issues. It's going to need to be upgraded as the season goes on. But that doesn't take away from the fact that Yuki Tsunoda has had a very good start to the season. He just looks a lot more consistent, and beating Gasly shows he's doing something right. The old saying is, even if you're on the worst car on the grid, just beating your teammate, that is your aim. You just got to beat your teammate. And he's doing that to, arguably, over the last few years, one of the most reliable drivers on the grid, one of the most consistent. So praise for Yuki Tsunoda, but this AlphaTauri will be interesting to see what it does as the season goes on. Haas next, and we mentioned talking about qualifying earlier, both cars in the top 10, finishing 8th and 10th, real positive. And then Magnussen from 8th to 17th, and Schumacher from 10th to 14th after there was a point where he potentially had a shot at points. How do you look at this weekend for Haas? They've dropped quite a few potential points.
Yeah, I feel like this car has a lot of potential, and it's been shown in the first race, but they just don't quite have the consistency as, for example, of Bottas. I don't know what happened with Schumacher. I don't know if it was the way he was driving or if the strategy didn't play into his hands, but he just can't get a break with all this bad luck, can he? Qualifying P10, you finish 10th in the sprint in Imola, but you don't get points for P10 in Imola. And Magnussen, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Verstappen. He does like to get his elbows out. I'm not going to say the Hulkenberg Magnussen stuff, but I think what I'm talking about. And even at Miami, he was barging his way through loads of cars. I think it was him and Stroll that were going off track, and he kept pushing each other and all that kind of stuff. I just think that they probably need a more consistent driver. Mick Schumacher's still young; he's still trying to learn. Magnussen, he's been in F1 for a few years, but obviously wasn't in F1 last year. And yeah, as you said, where they qualified, qualifying P10 and P8, to not get any points is disappointing for Haas.
Yeah, certainly disappointing. The thing with Kevin Magnussen is, and this has been the story throughout his F1 career, he has this immense talent. He is a fantastic driver, but he just has these moments of madness. And to be honest, I'm not even necessarily talking about today, because I think that it was just an unlucky coming together. But there are so many, in Miami especially, he's just sometimes too aggressive. Comparison with Verstappen very early doors is pretty close to being correct. He is very aggressive, and he just has his moments of madness. But I think his peak is just better than any driver that they could have potentially got in, even Hulkenberg. But even if you brought in Hulkenberg, then you could have potentially had a more consistent result. And then on the other side of the garage with Schumacher, what you need with a teammate of Magnussen is you need, when Magnussen does something silly or he is involved with a collision, you need to be there to getting the points that he's not. So far, Schumacher's got no points this year. Magnussen, on the other hand, is in the top 10 of the drivers' standings. So despite him having these moments, Magnussen is still getting pretty all right points. So Mick Schumacher, it's still early doors in the season, but it's his second season in F1, and he needs to start. He needs to just get a point, and hopefully he can push on from there. A point, that's it. Whether that point comes from 10 cars DNFing, it doesn't matter. He just needs to get that confidence up, because at the moment, he's not capitalizing on great opportunities of qualifying or stuff like that. So definitely not a good, as a weekend, all right, but not a good Sunday for Haas. Aston Martin next, and a team that were close to the points with one of the cars. Sebastian Vettel, 16th to 11th in a very solid drive, and Lance Stroll, 17th to 15th. But of course, could have been more than that, was involved in an incident with Gasly. How do you look at Aston Martin over the weekend? I mean, a lot of controversy, first and foremost, with the comparisons to the Red Bull car, to this new B-spec. But how do you look at the weekend as a whole for Aston Martin?
First of all, it's quite clear they don't have a green Red Bull. You just have to look where they qualified and finished. But yeah, when you look at where they qualified, Stroll P18 in qualifying, Vettel P16 qualifying, and then Vettel finishing 11th and Stroll 15th. Yeah, they definitely improved during the race. Vettel finished ahead of McLaren and Ricciardo. So yeah, the experience of Vettel, got him up a few places. But as you said, Stroll was, to be fair, both of them were kind of floating around that P10, P11, trying to get the points. But yeah, at the end of the day, they just didn't quite have the car, and yeah, missed out on points this weekend.
Yeah, they were one of three teams to miss out on points, and the final team is Williams. And there's been a few moments this year where this Williams car has looked very promising. I don't think this weekend has been one of them. Alex Albon qualifying 18th, finishing 18th. And then Latifi from 19th to 16th. So, and that's looking at the qualifying result after Alonso took an engine.
Latifi qualified 20th and Albon qualified 19th. Just to reiterate.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. After Alonso's engine penalty, that's where they started. So starting 18th, qualifying 19th for Albon, Latifi started 19th, qualifying 20th. Disappointing, their car just looked so off the pace. Albon, I don't think the TV showed him once, apart from maybe to get lapped. Latifi 19th to 16th, gaining a few places, did better than his teammate this weekend, and potentially a bit of promise when there's a lot of pressure on him to potentially lose his seat. What do you look at Williams over the weekend?
Yeah, in previous races, they've had a lot more potential, and this race has kind of brought them back down to earth. I was a little bit surprised of where Albon qualified, and yeah, obviously they both moved up a place because of Alonso's penalty. But yeah, Latifi had one of his better weekends, finishing P16, and yeah, Albon finishing P18. This Williams is, I don't know, one week it just seems like it can compete with the points, and then this weekend it feels like it should be nowhere near the points. That's probably my fair assessment of Williams, and yeah, it's not really much else to say.
No, there really isn't much to say about them. They're definitely one of a few teams this year, especially, that are very track dependent. As you said, they're inconsistent. When Albon has got so much praise, to finish behind Latifi just kind of shows the state that car was in this weekend. But let's move on to driver of the day. So the driver that we think did best during the race on Sunday. Matt, who have you gone for?
I've gone for the one that Formula One voted for as the fans, and that was Lewis Hamilton. I think it was a brilliant drive. He would have finished P4 if it wasn't for that issue he had 2 laps to go. I think it was some sort of leakage, and he had to back off massively. The incident with Magnussen, you could hear in the radio message how down he was, and he wanted to retire the car, and I think he said, "Oh, let's just save the engine." But he kept going. He had superb pace. As you said, Toto Wolff probably thought he could have been on for a race win if things went his way. But yeah, a superb drive, cut his way through the field, and that's the Hamilton we know. And yeah, it's good to see him finally get a better car that he's able to compete with.
Yeah, it's certainly good to see the Mercedes hopefully coming back into it with maybe a three car battle for the constructors now. If Mercedes can be consistent, that'll be exciting to see. My driver of the day, I was very close to choosing Alonso, 20th to 9th. Fantastic result. But I've gone for someone who didn't even gain that many places during the race, and that is Lando Norris, finishing P8 from starting the race in P11 after a track limits violation in qualifying. And of the face of it, it doesn't look incredible, but considering that he's driving with what we now know is tonsillitis in 35-degree heat, is just a fantastic achievement. Just one lapse of concentration in a Formula One car, one lapse of anything, and you're in trouble. You could be on a wall, you could be hitting someone. But to stay focused despite being really ill, and I just think it's a fantastic result for him, and he deserves plaudits. There's news coming out that McLaren have said that he might miss the Monaco Grand Prix, which is the next race in a week's time. which shows how bad this tonsillitis could be. If he's missing potentially a race in a week, then, he's clearly been driving in quite a bad way today. So I've given him driver of the day for a fantastic finish with a horrible illness, and we hope he gets well soon. Just reiterate that. And that wraps up our podcast, the review of the Spanish Grand Prix. And it's nice to be talking in such a positive way about it. It's great to be talking positively about Spanish Grand Prix after we haven't done that for quite a few years. But thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe. Our socials to keep up to date with whatever we're doing are down below. Next week is Monaco, so we'll have a preview and fantasy show coming your way in a few days. Again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.